My name is Hannah Collins, and 3 months of my life went into planning my sister's dream wedding. 3 months of dawn phone calls with vendors, negotiating impossible schedules, smoothing out personality clashes, and hand-selecting peonies that matched Grace's exact shade of blush pink. 3 months of using every professional connection. I'd built over years running my own event company to secure discounts and upgrades no ordinary bride could dream of. I even spent late nights hunched over my kitchen table, painstakingly calligraphy writing place cards for 200 guests, my fingers cramping while I told myself it was worth it. It wasn't just about a wedding. It was about rebuilding my family, restoring what had been fractured 2 years ago when my father, Edward Collins, died suddenly of a heart attack. His death left my mother, Sylvia, shattered, and my younger sister, Grace, adrift. I thought if I could give Grace the perfect wedding, it would help bring us back together. Today was supposed to be the culmination of all that effort. The Regency Grand Hotel gleamed under the late September sun as I stepped out of my car. White roses and baby's breath cascaded from the marble steps, arrangements I'd personally overseen at 5 this morning. My heels clicked sharply against the polished stone as I approached the entrance, smoothing the navy cocktail dress Grace had approved for family photos. 2 hours to go. Just enough time for a final walkthrough before guests began to arrive. I ran through my mental checklist as I crossed the lobby. Catering confirmation at 3:15, final sound check at 3:30, bridal suite touch-ups at 4 Crobe. Everything was perfect, or so I thought. Excuse me, ma'am. A security guard, a young man holding an iPad, stepped in front of me. Yes? I asked, flashing what I hoped was a warm, non-stressed smile. I'm here for the Collins White wedding. I'm Hannah Collins, the bride's sister. He began scrolling through the digital list, frowning. Then he scrolled again, slower this time. Could you spell your last name for me? Collins, Collins. Same as the bride. The frown deepened. He turned the iPad toward me, and my heart stuttered. There was my name, but under a section labeled vendors and contractors. Not guests, not family. There must be some kind of mistake, I said, my voice tight. I'm family. I can only go by the list provided by the bride and her mother, he replied, professional but firm. You're authorized for vendor access only. The service entrance is around the side of the building. The words hit me like a slap. The service entrance? Before I could argue further, my phone buzzed. A text from Grace lit up the screen. Where are you? Photographer needs ceremony lighting checked. Not. Where are you? We're taking family photos soon. Not. We're waiting for you, sis. Just another task to handle. My throat tightened as realization settled in. I wasn't here as a sister. I was here as staff. Could you call someone? I asked the guard, desperation creeping into my voice. My mother, Sylvia Collins. He hesitated, then radioed for a supervisor. I stood there, acutely aware of the elegant guests beginning to stream past me. Colleagues of my father's, family friends who'd known me since childhood. Their puzzled glances burned into my skin. 2 years ago, after Dad's sudden death, I'd been the one to hold everything together. I organized the funeral, handled company employees who didn't know what would happen next, even stepped in for interim business decisions while Grace and Mom were too consumed with grief to function. You're so strong, Hannah, everyone had said at the time. What they really meant was, you don't cry in public, so you must be fine. The click of familiar heels snapped me out of my thoughts. My mother swept into the lobby like royalty entering court. Every hair perfectly in place, her designer clutch gleaming in the light. Hannah, her voice carried that particular chill she reserved for underlings who'd overstepped. Why are you standing here instead of working? Working? I repeated, stunned. Mom, the security guard says I'm listed as a vendor. There's been a mistake. There's no mistake. Her gaze flicked to the guard, dismissive. You are working today, aren't you? The staff doesn't enter through the main lobby. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I'm Grace's sister, I managed. You're also the planner, she said smoothly. Like that explained everything. The guard shifted uncomfortably. Behind us, 2 of Dad's former business partners paused, watching with wide eyes. My humiliation was now public spectacle. Mom reached into her clutch and pulled out a small envelope, pressing it into my hand. Here's your payment. $3,000, as we discussed. I stared at the envelope as if it were a snake. We never discussed payment, I said flatly. The receipts in my car alone total $20,000, I added, my voice rising. She gave me a cool, pitying look. No one asked you to spend that much. You chose to, my jaw clenched. I was planning my sister's wedding. For family, Mom leaned in close, her perfume sharp and suffocating. Her next words were a whisper, meant only for me. "You've always been the help, Hannah." The world seemed to tilt. For a second, I thought I might actually collapse under the weight of it. Over her shoulder, through the glass doors of the ballroom, I saw Collins & Cummer's executives clustered near a table. The company my father built over 40 years, the one Grace had been running since his death. Their faces were grim, worried. Whispers floated back to me. "Numbers don't look good. Downward trend. If something doesn't change soon." My stomach knotted. I'd been quietly monitoring quarterly reports. Grace had no idea how to run the company, but Mom had insisted she take over, pushing me to the sidelines. Now, watching those men shake their heads, I understood. This wasn't just about today. It wasn't just about a wedding. Mom didn't just want me out of the pictures. She wanted me out of the family business. For good. 2 years ago, everything changed. It was a bitter February morning when my father, Edward Collins, collapsed in his office at Collins & Cowbrains, the company he'd built from the ground up. I was in a meeting across town when my phone rang. By the time I reached the hospital, he was already gone. Mom was sobbing uncontrollably in the waiting room. Grace, my younger sister, clung to her like a child, even though she was 26. I remember standing there frozen, feeling as though my chest had been ripped open, and yet everyone was looking at me for direction. "Hannah, what do we do?" Grace had asked through her tears. In that moment, I swallowed my own grief and became the one holding it all together. I handled everything: the funeral arrangements, notifications to employees, and longtime clients. The flood of paperwork that comes when a man like my father dies suddenly, leaving a company of 300 employees in limbo. Mom and Grace were too consumed by grief to function. I didn't blame them then. I thought if I stayed strong, we could heal together later. "You're so strong, Hannah," people kept saying. "Just like your father." At first, it felt like a compliment. Later, I understood what they really meant. You don't cry in public, so you must be fine. I wasn't fine, but there wasn't space for my pain in a house already drowning in tears. 3 weeks after the funeral, I stopped by the family home unexpectedly. Dad's car still sat in the driveway like a ghost, and for a moment, I let myself imagine he'd walk through the front door, grinning with some new business idea. Instead, I saw Walter Green's silver sedan parked out front. Walter had been Dad's attorney for decades, practically part of the family. I knocked lightly, then let myself in. Voices drifted from the dining room: Mom, Grace, and Walter. When I stepped into the doorway, all 3 heads snapped toward me. "Oh, Hannah," Mom said, clearly startled. She quickly slid a stack of papers into a folder. "We didn't expect you." "What's going on?" I asked slowly. "We're just handling a few formalities," she said smoothly, her tone dismissive. "Nothing you need to worry about?" Walter cleared his throat. "Perhaps Hannah should—" "We've got this covered, Walter," Mom interrupted sharply. "It's just estate matters. All that legal language can be so confusing, darling. Better to let me and Grace sort it out." I stared at her, stunned. I'd graduated top of my class with a degree in business management. If anyone was qualified to understand legal and financial documents, it was me. But I was still raw from grief, too exhausted to fight. "Fine," I murmured, backing out of the room. As I left, I caught Walter's expression. Uneasy, almost apologetic. That should have been my first clue. 6 months later, Grace announced her engagement at Sunday dinner. "I need the perfect wedding planner," she gushed, flashing her new diamond ring. "Someone who really understands our family's status." My Uncle Samuel smiled. "Hannah could do it. She's incredible at events." Grace's laughter rang out, light and tinkling, but with an edge that made my stomach knot. Oh, I couldn't possibly ask Hannah to work for free. Unless— She tilted her head, eyes wide and innocent. "Would you mind, Hannah? As my wedding gift?" The table went silent. Mom gave me that expectant smile, and the rest of the family waited, holding their breath. It was a trap. If I refused, I'd be the selfish sister who wouldn't help family. If I agreed, I'd officially become staff. I forced a smile. Of course. Family helps family, Dad's favorite phrase. Once it had meant loyalty and love. Now it tasted like ash. Loyalty and love. Now it tasted like ash. From that moment, my life became a whirlwind of fittings, tastings, and endless logistics. When Grace's budget ran tight, I quietly covered deposits with my own money. When vendors threatened to cancel due to last-minute changes, I called in favors, leveraging every professional relationship I had. I told myself it didn't matter, as long as Grace had the wedding of her dreams. But Grace never once acknowledged my sacrifices. "You're so good at this," she said casually during a dress fitting, while I juggled 3 phone calls and a scheduling crisis. "I could never keep all these details straight like you do." Her bridesmaids exchanged looks. One finally asked, "Wait, Hannah, aren't you in the bridal party?" Before I could answer, Grace laughed. "Oh no, Hannah's too busy being amazing behind the scenes. She doesn't need to be up front. That's not really her thing. Not my thing." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Standing beside my only sister on her wedding day apparently wasn't my thing. But coordinating the entire event for free? That was exactly my thing. As the wedding day approached, I kept waiting for some gesture of gratitude, a heartfelt note, a moment of inclusion, anything. Instead, I found myself drowning in checklists and invoices, while Grace floated from spa appointments to tastings, glowing with excitement. The night before the wedding, I stayed up past midnight, double-checking seating charts. Grace texted me a single word. "Thanks." That was when it hit me. I wasn't family anymore. I was the help. My phone buzzed in my hand for the 3rd time, pulling me from my spiraling thoughts. The name flashing across the screen made my stomach twist. Walter Green, Dad's lawyer. His friend, the first text read, "Hannah, urgent matter regarding your father's estate. Please don't leave the venue." The next came seconds later. Legally time-sensitive. Must be addressed before the ceremony begins. And now a third. This cannot wait. Do not sign anything until we speak. My pulse quickened. Walter hadn't spoken to me much since Dad's death. Most of his communication had gone through Mom, at her insistence. For him to be this persistent now, something was very, very wrong. Before I could call him back, a flustered-looking venue manager hurried toward us, clutching a thick, sealed envelope. "Mrs. Collins," she said breathlessly to my mother, "there's been a special delivery, urgent legal documentation requiring signatures from all beneficiaries." Sylvia's perfectly made-up face didn't so much as twitch, but I caught the way her hand tightened on her clutch. "That won't be necessary," she said smoothly, her voice cool and commanding. "There are no pending estate matters. You can take it back." The manager blinked, clearly caught between duty and deference. "Ma'am, Mr. Green specified this was legally time-sensitive and had to be handled before the ceremony." Grace swept into the doorway at that moment, radiant in her $10,000 gown, a gown I'd negotiated down from $15,000. "Mom, the photographer's ready for family portraits." She glanced at me and frowned. "Why are you still out here? You should be checking on the reception setup." "She's just leaving," Sylvia said sharply. "Actually," my voice came out steadier than I expected. "I'm not leaving. Not until I review those documents." Sylvia's head snapped toward me, eyes narrowing. "This isn't your concern." "It is," I said firmly. "My legal name is Hannah Collins. My father was Edward Collins. That makes me a beneficiary of his estate, regardless of today's vendor list." The venue manager's eyes widened, darting between us. Grace gave an exasperated laugh. "Hannah, seriously? You're embarrassing yourself. This is my wedding day. And apparently my entire existence doesn't matter," I shot back. The tension in the air was electric. Guests had begun to hover nearby, whispering. A few pulled out their phones. 5 minutes later, Walter Green himself appeared in the doorway. His face was grim, his usually neat silver hair slightly mussed, like he'd rushed to get here. "Walter," Mom said, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. "This is highly inappropriate." "Linda," Walter said evenly, "I've been trying to reach you for 6 months. You've ignored 17 certified letters and multiple calls." "Because our business is concluded," she snapped. "The estate's business," he corrected, "is far from concluded." Grace looked between them, confused. "What's going on?" "There are no issues," Sylvia insisted. "Nothing that needs to ruin this day." Walter turned to me instead. "Hannah, there are documents you need to see immediately." "She doesn't need to see anything." Sylvia's voice rose almost shrill now. "The will was executed. It's done." Walter's next words silenced the entire room. "Which will?" A collective gasp rippled through the lobby. Even the security guard stopped pretending to check his phone. Grace's brow furrowed. "What do you mean, which will?" Mom's lips thinned, her skin blanching beneath her perfect makeup. Walter calmly lifted his leather folder. "The amended will Edward signed 2 weeks before his death." The one Linda claimed didn't exist when you submitted the older version to probate court? My knees nearly gave way. Amended will. 2 weeks before Dad died, he'd called me into his office late one night. We'd talked about the company, about legacy. I thought it was just a sentimental moment. Now, I realized he'd been trying to prepare me. Present at the signing, Walter continued, were 2 witnesses, Dr. Malcolm Reeves, Edward's physician, and Margaret Holt. His CFO, Dr. Reeves, seated near the front, stood. I can confirm Edward was fully lucid and completely aware of his actions that day. Margaret rose next, her voice clear and steady. And I witnessed his signature personally. The room erupted in murmurs. Phones lifted higher, recording everything. Let's discuss this privately, Mom hissed through clenched teeth. No, Walter said firmly. Given the deception at play, transparency is essential. Grace shook her head, her perfect curls trembling. This is ridiculous. Daddy left the company to me. That's what the will said. Walter's eyes softened with pity. The amended will says otherwise. He unfolded the document with deliberate care, letting the silence stretch before he read. Edward Collins leaves 60% of all assets, including controlling interest in Collins & Comers to Hannah Collins. I froze. 60%! The room gasped as he continued. Grace Collins receives 20%. Linda Collins receives 20% plus the family home. Grace's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. That can't be right. Daddy wouldn't do that. There's more, Walter said, his tone growing sharper. He held up a second page. Edward anticipated potential interference. He added a fraud clause. If it's proven this amended will was hidden or contested in bad faith. Grace's share drops to 10% and Hannah's rises to 70%. The noise in the room became deafening. Guests gasped, shouted, whispered. Several were openly live-streaming the chaos now. Grace turned to Mom, her face pale under layers of makeup. You knew, she choked out. You knew about this. Mom didn't answer. Walter's voice cut through the chaos like a gavel. Linda Collins, you submitted the outdated will while swearing under oath that no later version existed. That is perjury. The weight of his words hung heavy in the air. Grace stumbled backward, clutching her bouquet like a lifeline. The groom rushed to steady her, but she shoved him away, wild-eyed. No, she whispered. This isn't happening. This is supposed to be my day. I stood rooted to the spot, every emotion I'd buried for years crashing over me. Rage, vindication, grief. This was never about the wedding, I said quietly, though the microphone nearby carried my words across the ballroom. It was about erasing me. Walter turned to me, solemn. Hannah, as the rightful heir and majority shareholder, do you accept your inheritance? I took a deep breath. My hands no longer shook. Yes, I said, my voice ringing clear. I accept. The ballroom exploded into chaos. Grace collapsed to the floor, sobbing. Sylvia staggered, finally stripped of her composure. And I stood tall at the center of it all. Not the help, not the outsider, but the woman my father had trusted to carry on his legacy. The ballroom was still buzzing when I turned to Margaret Holt, Collins & Co.'s longtime CFO. Margaret, I said, my voice steady though my hands were trembling. How bad is it? Her lips tightened. Bad, Hannah, very bad. Jessica's been signing off on anything Linda puts in front of her. The company is bleeding money. I didn't hesitate. Pulling out my phone, I dialed our corporate bank representative, putting him on speaker. This is Hannah Collins, I said firmly. Effective immediately, freeze all Collins & Comers accounts pending an internal audit, Sylvia gasped. You can't do that. Yes, I can, I shot back. I'm the majority shareholder now. My authorization code is... I rattled off the numbers Dad had drilled into me years ago. Just in case. The representative confirmed the freeze, while guests gawked like they were watching a live drama series. Also, I continued, all company credit cards are to be deactivated immediately. As if on cue, Grace's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and let out a small, strangled noise. My card was just declined. Welcome to reality, I said coldly. The CFO's phone pinged seconds later. Accounts frozen, she confirmed. I turned back to Margaret. Your interim CEO, effective now. No spending over $5,000 without my written approval. Margaret straightened, relief flickering across her face. Understood. I've been waiting for this day, Hannah. Waiting for this day, Hannah. Grace's groom, Daniel, had been standing in stunned silence throughout the entire spectacle. Finally, he turned to his bride, his face pale. Bankruptcy? He asked, voice shaking. Grace, you told me the company was thriving. Grace's lower lip trembled. I I thought it was. I didn't read the reports. Mom said. Daniel took a step back. You didn't read them. You just signed everything? The whispers around the room turned sharper. This is my wedding day, Grace sobbed. Can't we just— No, he interrupted, his voice suddenly firm. We can't. The honeymoon is off. We need to talk about what you've lied about. All of it. His family, conservative old money, exchanged mortified glances. They left the ballroom without another word. Sylvia tried to rally, smoothing her dress as if appearance alone could fix this disaster. Hannah, surely we can discuss terms privately, she said in a low, cajoling tone. Terms? My laugh was bitter. You mean negotiate how much of Dad's company you get to keep after you lied under oath and hid his will? Her expression hardened. We did what was necessary for the family. No, I said, stepping closer, my voice carrying so the guests could hear. You did what was necessary to control the family? I held up a hand when she started to protest. You have 30 days to return every penny you funneled out of the company. If you don't, I press charges. Fraud, embezzlement, perjury. You'll be facing prison time. Mom, Sylvia's face went white. By dawn the next morning, videos of the wedding will reveal were everywhere. Clips of Grace collapsing, Sylvia's mask cracking, and me standing tall played on news channels and social media feeds alike. Collins, wedding scandal trended. Nationwide by noon. The same high society crowd that once fawned over my mother and sister now turned on them like wolves. At the country club, whispers followed Sylvia wherever she went, until she stopped going entirely. Invitations dried up. Her carefully curated social empire crumbled in weeks. Grace fared no better. Paparazzi camped outside her house, eager for a photo of the disgraced heiress. Her friends stopped answering her calls. Terrified of being caught in the fallout, the pristine Collins family image was gone forever. While Mom and Grace floundered, I focused on rebuilding what truly mattered. Dad's company. On my first official day as CEO, I walked through the front doors of Collins & Cosent, the remaining employees, worn down by months of chaos, stood and applauded. We tried to warn Jessica, the head of sales told me, relief etched on his face. She said we were being negative. Your mom backed her up, said we were undermining female leadership. Competence isn't about gender, I said firmly. It's about ability. And I promise you, things will change starting today. And they did. Within 3 months, we rehired 50 employees Grace had recklessly laid off. 2 major contracts Grace had lost were renegotiated and regained. The stock price climbed steadily, reversing months of decline. Investors began to see me not as Edward Collins' daughter, but as a capable leader in my own right. Every day, I thought of Dad. The office still smelled faintly of his cologne. Sometimes, when I sat at his old desk, I swore I could almost hear his voice urging me forward. Grace's life unraveled quickly. Daniel filed for an annulment by the 2nd week, citing fraud. The prenup he'd insisted on protected him from her mounting debts. You ruined my life, Grace sobbed during our final phone call. No, Grace, I said quietly. You ruined your life when you agreed to steal what was mine. Mom told me it was rightfully mine, she wailed. Dad was confused when he changed the will. Dad was many things, I said coldly. Confused wasn't one of them. By the end of the month, Grace packed up and moved to another state. She took an entry-level job as a receptionist at a small law firm, the first honest work she'd ever done. Ironically, she was finally working for a living instead of living off others. Sylvia fought harder, but in the end, she had nothing left but the family home. The embezzled money had to be repaid. To do so, she sold her designer wardrobe, her beloved country club membership, even her jewelry collection. The house itself was protected by a clause in Dad's will. She couldn't sell it without my approval. Every time she looked at me, I saw the fury in her eyes. But she followed the rules, because now she had no power. The woman who once controlled everything through manipulation was reduced to asking permission just to make repairs. By the end of the first quarter, Collins & Co. was thriving again. As I stood in the lobby one evening, watching employees leave with smiles instead of dread, I finally understood what Dad had seen in me all along. He hadn't just left me a company. He'd left me the strength to save it. And for the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving, I was leading. The day after the wedding, Walter Green came to see me. We sat together in my father's old office, my office now, surrounded by the rich, warm scent of the leather chairs and mahogany bookshelves Dad had loved. I have something for you. Walter said softly, placing a sealed envelope on the desk between us. Edward asked me to give this to you privately when the time was right. My breath caught. I stared at the envelope, my name written in Dad's familiar, bold handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it and unfolded the letter. My dearest Hannah, if you're reading this, then the people I love most have shown you exactly who they are. Believe them. Linda will always favor Grace. She has never understood your strength. Grace, on the other hand, has always needed validation, and your mother has given it to her at your expense. Hannah, what she calls coldness, I call clarity. You see things as they are, not as you wish them to be. That is why the company needs you. Do not waste time seeking approval from those who will never give it freely. Trust actions, not words. And when the moment comes to fight for what is yours, fight without hesitation. I have given you the tools, the allies, and the authority you need. Use them. You are my legacy, Hannah. Not because you are my daughter, but because you are capable of carrying what I built. With love and unshakable pride, Dad tears blurred my vision, but for the first time, they weren't tears of grief or frustration. They were tears of release. Dad had seen me, not the image my mother painted, not the role Grace projected on me, but me. And he had trusted me to lead, even when no one else did. I placed the letter in a frame on my desk, where it would stay as a reminder of why I fought so hard. A year later, my phone buzzed with a message from Grace. Can we meet? Please, I need to apologize. I hesitated before replying. Part of me wanted to ignore her, but another part, the one that still remembered being sisters before all the lies, agreed to a public coffee shop where we couldn't cause a scene. When Grace walked in, I barely recognized her. Gone were the designer clothes and perfectly styled hair. She looked normal, human. I've been in therapy, she said quietly, sitting across from me. I've had to face some hard truths about myself and about Mom. I sipped my coffee, waiting. I'm sorry, she whispered. For everything. The wedding, the lies, letting Mom convince me I deserved what was yours. I didn't understand how toxic it all was until I got away from it. Her sincerity was real. For the first time in years, I saw genuine humility in her eyes. I appreciate that, I said carefully. And I accept your apology. But forgiveness doesn't erase the past. Grace nodded, tears brimming. Does that mean we can be sisters again? I took a deep breath. We can be civil relatives. Sisters require trust. And trust will take time. Grace wiped her eyes, accepting my terms. It wasn't a perfect reunion, but it was a start. My mother, on the other hand, never apologized. She maintained to anyone who would listen that she had done what any good mother would do to protect her struggling child. But beneath her excuses was a bitter silence. She complied with the boundaries I set because she had no other choice. She attended company events as a guest, sitting quietly in the back. She lived in the family home, but only under the conditions spelled out in Dad's will. The woman who once ruled through manipulation now existed in a cage of her own making. A cage built by her own actions. A cage built by her own actions. In the quiet moments, I often thought back to that wedding day. The day everything changed. People still whispered about it, still shared the viral videos that had exposed our family's private war. For a while, I wondered if I had destroyed my family. But over time, I came to understand the truth. I hadn't destroyed anything. I had simply revealed what was already broken. Dad's company thrived under my leadership. Within a year, we'd not only recovered financially, but surpassed projections. The employees I'd fought to save were loyal and motivated, proud to be part of something meaningful again. I built friendships with people who valued me for who I was, not what I could do for them. I even started dating someone who saw my strength as an asset rather than a threat. Most importantly, I rebuilt my sense of self-worth. I stopped looking for love where it wasn't freely given. Family, I learned, isn't defined by blood. It's defined by respect, trust, and boundaries. The memory of walking out of that ballroom still plays in my mind sometimes. At the time, I felt utterly alone, stripped of everything I thought I had. But now I see it differently. I didn't walk out powerless. I walked out free. Free of their expectations. Free of their manipulation. Free to become the woman my father always believed I could be. That day, they tried to label me as the help. Instead, I claimed my place as the rightful heir to my father's legacy, and in doing so, I discovered something even more important. My own strength. I walked out of that wedding alone, but no longer powerless.